I surprised my nephew on his first day of school. You won't believe his reaction. Okay, so I gotta tell you about this absolutely crazy thing I did a few weeks ago. Like, I'm still kind of buzzing from it, you know? So, my nephew, little Maddie, well, actually, he's not that little anymore. He just turned 6, was about to start first grade. His very first day of real school, not just preschool or kindergarten, but like the real deal with homework and everything. Now, let me back up a sec and give you some context here, because otherwise this whole thing won't make sense. Maddie and I, we've always been super close. Like, ridiculously close. I'm his dad's younger brother, and I'm only like 12 years older than him. So I'm kinda like the cool uncle, you know what I mean? Not trying to brag or anything, but I'm definitely the one who lets him stay up late when I'm babysitting and sneaks him extra cookies when his parents aren't looking. That kinda uncle. Anyway, the thing is, I moved away about 8 months ago, got this job offer in another state that I just couldn't turn down, and it was like a 4-hour drive from where my brother and his family live. So I hadn't seen Maddie in person for almost 3 months at that point. We'd FaceTime and stuff, but it's not the same, right? And this kid, man, he was so bummed when I left, like proper heartbroken. He didn't really get why I had to go, and honestly, it broke my heart too. So when my sister-in-law texted me about Maddie's first day of school coming up, something just clicked in my brain. She was telling me how nervous he was, how he'd been having these little anxiety moments about starting first grade, asking if he'd make friends, if the teacher would be nice, all that stuff that kids worry about. And she mentioned, kinda casually, but I could tell she was worried, that he'd been saying he wished Uncle Jake could be there for his first day. That's me, by the way. I'm Jake. Should have mentioned that earlier, huh? Anyway, the moment I read that text, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make this happen. I didn't tell anyone, though. That was the key part of my plan. I wanted it to be a complete and total surprise, not just for Maddie, but for my brother and his wife, too, because they'd been super understanding about me moving away, but I knew they missed having me around. So I started planning this whole thing out. The first day of school was on a Wednesday, which actually worked out perfect for me, because I had some vacation days I hadn't used yet. I talked to my boss, got the time off approved, and then I started working on the logistics. Now, here's where it gets a bit tricky, right? Because I had to coordinate with my sister-in-law without my brother knowing and without Maddie finding out. I called Sarah, that's my sister-in-law, on a day when I knew my brother would be at work. I was like, Sarah, don't freak out, but I want to surprise Maddie on his first day of school. Can you help me pull this off? And oh man, she was so excited, like immediately on board. She started talking a mile a minute about all the different ways we could do it, and we had to kinda rein it in and figure out what would work best. The plan we came up with was pretty simple, but I think that's what made it so good. See, the school had this thing where parents could walk their kids into the classroom on the first day. It was encouraged, actually. They wanted it to be this nice, warm, welcome kind of vibe. So the idea was that my brother and Sarah would walk Maddie in like normal, but I'd already be inside the classroom, waiting. Now, getting into the classroom beforehand, that required some extra coordination. Sarah had to call the school, explain the situation to the principal and Maddie's new teacher, Mrs. Henderson. And let me tell you, they were both totally cool with it. Apparently, Mrs. Henderson thought it was absolutely adorable. Those were literally her words, according to Sarah. The principal said as long as I checked in at the office first and got a visitor's badge, I could come in early and wait in the classroom. All right, so fast forward to the actual day. I drove down the night before and stayed at this little hotel near my brother's place. Didn't tell anyone I was in town. I was being all sneaky and covert, like I was on some secret mission or something. It was actually pretty fun, not gonna lie. I felt like a spy. The morning of, I woke up super early, way earlier than I needed to, honestly. I was just so pumped up with adrenaline and excitement that I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Maddie's face was gonna look like when he saw me. Would he cry? Would he scream? Would he just freeze up? I had no idea, and that was part of what made it so exciting. I got to the school at like 7:30. School didn't start until 8:15. But I wanted to make sure I had plenty of time to get checked in, meet Mrs. Henderson, and get positioned in the classroom before any kids started showing up. The office staff were super nice. This older lady at the front desk, probably in her 60s, she gave me this huge smile when I explained who I was and why I was there. She was like, "Oh, honey, that is just the sweetest thing. That little boy is gonna lose his mind." And she helped me get my visitor badge all sorted out. Mrs. Henderson met me in the hallway outside her classroom. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, early 30s. Super bubbly and friendly, though. She had this energy about her that immediately made me think, okay, Maddie's gonna love this teacher. She showed me around the classroom a bit, pointing out where Maddie's desk was gonna be, where all the different learning stations were set up, all that stuff. The classroom was really cool, actually. It had this whole jungle theme going on, with like paper trees and vines hanging from the ceiling, stuffed animals everywhere, and these really colorful posters all over the walls. There was a reading corner with big cushions and a bookshelf, an art station with easels and paint supplies, and this rug in the middle of the room where I guess they do circle time or whatever. Mrs. Henderson and I talked for a bit about where I should position myself. We decided that I'd sit in this chair near her desk, kinda off to the side, but still visible when you walked in the door. That way, I wouldn't be like hiding or jumping out at him, which might have been too overwhelming, but I'd still be right there where he could see me as soon as he looked around the room. People started arriving around 8. Other kids with their parents, all looking kinda nervous and excited at the same time. Some of the kids were crying, clinging to their parents. Others were running around all hyped up, checking everything out. It was this whole mix of emotions, you know? And I'm sitting there watching all of this, my heart just pounding in my chest, waiting for Maddie to show up. Mrs. Henderson was greeting each family at the door, shaking hands with the parents, getting down on one knee to talk to the kids at their level. She was really good at it, too. You could tell she'd done this before and knew how to make everyone feel comfortable. Then, at like 8:10, I saw them. My brother Marcus was carrying Maddie's new backpack, this bright blue one with dinosaurs all over it that Maddie had picked out himself, according to Sarah. Sarah was holding Maddie's hand, and Maddie himself was walking between them, looking so small and nervous. He was wearing this little polo shirt and khaki pants, and his hair was all combed nice. He looked so grown up, and it hit me right then how much I'd missed watching him grow these past few months. They stopped at the classroom door, and Mrs. Henderson did her greeting thing. I could see Maddie kind of hiding behind Sarah's leg a little bit, peeking out at the classroom. Marcus was saying something to Mrs. Henderson, probably introducing themselves, and then Sarah gently nudged Maddie forward to say hi to his new teacher. This is it, I thought. This is the moment. They started walking into the classroom, and Maddie was looking around at everything. The jungle decorations, The other kids, the toys and books. His eyes were just taking it all in, wide and curious. He hadn't seen me yet. I was sitting pretty still, just watching him, and I could feel this huge grin spreading across my face that I couldn't control even if I wanted to. Sarah saw me first. Her eyes went straight to where I was sitting, and her hand flew up to her mouth. She grabbed Marcus's arm, and he looked at her like, "What?" and then followed her gaze over to me. His face went from confusion to total shock in like half a second. It was hilarious, but Mai still hadn't noticed. He was tugging on Sarah's other hand, pointing at something on the wall, asking her a question I couldn't quite hear. And then Sarah, being the genius that she is, she goes, "Maddie, honey, why don't you look over there by Mrs. Henderson's desk? I think there's something special waiting for you." Okay, so this next part, I'm gonna remember it for the rest of my life. I swear, it's burned into my brain like a permanent movie. Maddie turned his head in the direction Sarah was pointing. His eyes scanned the area near the desk, going right past me at first, then coming back, and then they locked onto my face. For a second, and I mean a literal second, like time actually stopped. He just stared at me. His mouth fell open a little bit, and his eyes got huge. I could literally see his brain trying to process what he was seeing. Like, is that? No, it can't be. But it looks like... Wait. And then it hit him. Full recognition. Uncle Jake? Oh man, the way he screamed my name, it was so loud that literally every single person in that classroom stopped what they were doing and turned to look. The other kids, the other parents, Mrs. Henderson, everyone. And I didn't even care. I stood up from my chair, and before I could even fully straighten up, Maddie had ripped his hand out of Sarah's and was running full speed across the classroom toward me. He crashed into me so hard that I actually stumbled backward a couple steps. His little arms wrapped around my waist, well, as far as they could reach, anyway, and he just held on for dear life. And then he started crying. Not like sad crying, but that overwhelmed, happy crying that kids do when they're feeling too many emotions at once. His whole body was shaking, and I could feel my shirt getting wet from his tears. I dropped down to my knees so I could hug him properly, and he immediately wrapped his arms around my neck. "You're here! You're really here!" he kept saying, over and over. His voice was all muffled because his face was buried in my shoulder. "I can't believe you're here." "Of course I'm here, buddy," I told him, and I'm not gonna lie. My voice was getting pretty shaky too. I'm not usually a crier, but man, this was getting to me. "You think I'd miss your first day of first grade? No way, not a chance." He pulled back just enough to look at my face, like he needed to make absolutely sure it was really me and not some kind of dream or trick. His cheeks were all red and splotchy from crying, and his eyes were still leaking tears. "But you live far away now," he said, and his bottom lip was trembling. "How are you here?" "I drove down last night," I explained, reaching up to wipe some of the tears off his face with my thumb. "I stayed in a hotel and came to your school super early this morning so I could surprise you. Your mom helped me plan the whole thing." He looked over at Sarah, who was now openly crying too, and then back at me. "You did this for me?" he asked, and the way he said it, so full of wonder and disbelief, it just about broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. "Absolutely for you, dude. You're my favorite nephew in the whole world." "I'm your only nephew," he said, which made me laugh because he always says that when I call him my favorite. "Well then, it's a good thing you're such an awesome kid, huh?" Otherwise, I'd be stuck with a not awesome only nephew, and that would be a bummer. That got him to smile through his tears, which was what I was going for. The other families in the classroom were watching us now, and a bunch of them were smiling too. A couple of the moms looked like they might start crying themselves. Even Mrs. Henderson had her hand over her heart with this expression like she was watching the most touching thing she'd ever seen. Marcus came over and put his hand on my shoulder. "You're crazy, you know that?" he said, but he was grinning from ear to ear. "I can't believe you pulled this off." "Had to do it," I said, standing up but keeping one hand on Maddie's shoulder 'cause he was still holding on to my arm, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. This is a big day. First day of first grade is a huge deal. "It really is," Marcus agreed. He looked down at Maddie, whose tears were finally starting to slow down. "How you feeling now, buddy? Still nervous about today?" Maddie shook his head hard, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "No way! This is going to be the best day ever now! Uncle Jake is here!" Mrs. Henderson came over then, introducing herself to me properly and thanking me for bringing such joy into our classroom on the very first day. She suggested that maybe we should take a few minutes to let Maddie settle down and then maybe take some photos to commemorate the moment. So that's what we did. Sarah had her phone out in seconds, snapping pictures of me and Maddie together. We took some serious ones where we were both smiling at the camera, and then some silly ones where we made goofy faces. Maddie insisted on taking one where he was showing off his muscles, and I was pretending to be impressed by how strong he was. Classic Maddie move. Then we took some with the whole family, me, Marcus, Sarah, and Maddie, all together. Mrs. Henderson even offered to take a couple so Sarah could be in them too. Looking at those photos now, you can see how red and puffy Maddie's eyes still were from crying. But his smile is absolutely huge. Genuine joy right there on his face. Other kids were starting to come up to us, curious about what all the commotion was about. One little girl with pigtails tugged on Mrs. Henderson's sleeve and asked, "Is that Maddie's dad?" Which made Marcus and I both crack up. "This is my Uncle Jake," Maddie announced proudly to everyone within earshot. "He lives far away, but he came here to see me on my first day." He was beaming with pride, standing up a little straighter, and I could tell that having me there had completely transformed his whole attitude about the day. Before I knew it, it was time for parents to leave so class could actually start. The school had this whole thing where they'd ring a bell and parents were supposed to say their goodbyes and head out. Sarah gave Maddie a big hug and kiss, and Marcus did the same, telling him to have a great day and that they'd be right there to pick him up when school was over. Then Maddie turned to me, and I could see the panic starting to creep into his face. "Wait, you're not leaving too? Are you?" I looked at Mrs. Henderson, not totally sure what the protocol was. She smiled and said, "Well, usually we don't have visitors stay during class, but this is a special circumstance. If you'd like to stay for a little while, just until Maddie gets settled, that would be fine with me." "Really?" Maddie's whole face lit up again. "Really," she confirmed. "Uncle Jake can stay until we finished our first activity. How does that sound?" "That sounds amazing," Maddie practically shouted, then remembered he was in a classroom and lowered his voice. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson." So I stayed. I sat in that same chair near her desk, and I watched as Mrs. Henderson gathered all the kids onto the rug for circle time. She started by having each kid introduce themselves and share one thing they were excited about for first grade. When it was Maddie's turn, he stood up and said, "My name is Matthew, but everyone calls me Maddie. and I'm excited for first grade because my Uncle Jake surprised me today, and he's here." A bunch of the other kids said, "Aw," and turned around to look at me, which was pretty cute. After introductions, Mrs. Henderson had them do this activity where they had to draw a picture of their family. She passed out paper and crayons to everyone, and the kids all spread out to different spots around the room to work. Maddie grabbed his supplies and immediately came over to sit on the floor right next to my chair. I watched him draw his family. He did stick figures of Marcus, Sarah, himself, and their dog Pepper. And then, in the corner of the paper, he drew another stick figure. This one was taller than the others and had a big smile. He wrote Uncle Jake above it in his 6-year-old handwriting, with the uncle spelled wrong, but in the most adorable way possible. "That's you," he told me, pointing at the drawing. "You're part of my family picture because you're here today." I'm telling you right now, I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from getting emotional again. This kid, man, he just has this way of saying things that hit you right in the heart. When the activity was done, Mrs. Henderson collected all the drawings and hung them up on a bulletin board at the back of the classroom. She made a point of telling Maddie that his was wonderful and that she loved how he included everyone who was special to him. It was probably around 9 o'clock by then, and I knew I needed to go. As much as I wanted to stay all day, I didn't want to be that weird uncle who overstayed his welcome on the first day of school. Mrs. Henderson gave me a look that was like, "Okay, it's probably time," and I nodded. I got down on one knee next to Maddie and said, "All right, buddy, I gotta head out now so you can focus on your class. But I'm so proud of you for being brave and starting first grade today. You're gonna do awesome." His face fell a little. "You have to go?" "I do. But hey, guess what? I'm not driving back home until tomorrow afternoon. So after school today, we're gonna hang out. Your mom and dad said we could all go get ice cream together. How does that sound?" His eyes went wide. "Really? We get ice cream today?" "Really, it's a celebration for your first day of first grade. Plus, I want to hear all about everything you learned today." That perked him right up. "Okay, I'm going to learn so much and tell you everything." I gave him a high five and then a fist bump, which was our thing. Then I waved to Mrs. Henderson, thanked her for being so cool about everything, and headed toward the door. I looked back once and saw Maddie sitting crisscross applesauce on the rug with the other kids, watching Mrs. Henderson as she started reading them a story. He caught my eye and gave me a little wave, and I waved back. Walking out of that school, I felt this weird mix of emotions. I was happy that I'd been able to surprise him and make his first day special. I was sad that I lived so far away and couldn't be there for moments like this more often. I was grateful that Marcus and Sarah were so cool about letting me be such a big part of Maddie's life, even from a distance. All of it just swirled together into this bittersweet feeling that sat heavy in my chest. Marcus and Sarah were waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against their car. Sarah saw me first and started walking over, and before I could say anything, she wrapped me in a huge hug. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "Thank you so much for doing that. You have no idea what it meant to him, to all of us. He's been so anxious about today," Marcus added, coming over to join us. Like, genuinely stressed about it, in a way that we weren't sure how to help him with. And you fixed it. In like 5 minutes, you completely turned his whole attitude around. "That's what uncles are for, right?" I said, trying to play it off like it was no big deal, even though it obviously was. We stood there in the parking lot for a while, just talking. They told me more about how nervous Maddie had been leading up to this day, how he'd been having trouble sleeping, how he'd been asking them questions about first grade constantly. They said that having me there had been literally the perfect solution, that it had given him something positive and exciting to focus on instead of all his worries. "So, what's your plan for the rest of the day?" Marcus asked. "You just hanging around town?" "Pretty much. I figured I'd check out some of my old favorite spots, maybe grab lunch somewhere, kill time until school gets out. Then we'll do that ice cream thing I promised Maddie. You want to come over for a bit?" Sarah offered. "We've got coffee and I made banana bread this morning. Plus, we can show you some recent videos of Maddie we haven't sent you yet." I definitely wasn't going to turn that down, so I followed them back to their house. It felt weird being there after so many months away. Everything looked exactly the same furniture, the same photos on the walls, the same coffee mug collection that Sarah kept adding to. But it also felt different somehow, like I was visiting instead of just coming home. We sat in their kitchen, drinking coffee and eating Sarah's banana bread, which was incredible, by the way. She'd added chocolate chips to it, which was a game changer. Marcus pulled out his phone and started showing me videos. Maddie's last day of kindergarten, a video of him learning to ride his bike without training wheels, one of him singing some song from a movie at the top of his lungs in the car. We laughed at all of them, and I saved a bunch to my phone so I could watch them again later. "He asks about you all the time," Sarah said at one point, her voice getting soft. "Like multiple times a week. When is Uncle Jake coming to visit? Can we FaceTime Uncle Jake? Do you think Uncle Jake would like this? It's sweet, but also, I know it's hard on him that you're not around as much." That hit me harder than I expected. I knew Maddie missed me, obviously, but hearing it laid out like that made it real in a different way. "Yeah," I said, not really knowing what else to say. "It's hard on me too. I miss you guys a lot. Miss being able to just show up whenever and hang out." "We understand why you had to move," Marcus said quickly. "The job opportunity was too good to pass up. We've never wanted you to feel guilty about that." "I know, but I still feel guilty sometimes, like I abandoned you guys or something." "You didn't abandon anyone," Sarah said firmly. "You're living your life and pursuing your career. That's what you're supposed to do. And honestly, the way you stay connected with Maddie, even from far away, the FaceTime calls, the packages you send him, surprise visits like this one, you're doing everything right. He knows you love him. That's what matters." We talked for a long time, catching up on everything that had been going on in our lives. They told me about Marcus's job, about some drama. Around noon, they had to head out to run some errands, so I left and drove around town for a bit. I went past my old apartment building, which looked exactly the same, except they'd repainted the exterior. I stopped by the sandwich shop I used to go to all the time and grabbed lunch. The owner actually recognized me and asked where I'd been, and I explained about the move. We chatted for a few minutes while he made my sandwich. And it reminded me how much I'd liked living in a smaller town where people actually knew you. I spent the afternoon just driving around and reminiscing. Went past the park where I used to take Maddie to play on the swings. Drove by the library where we'd go for story time when he was younger. Stopped at the comic book store where I'd buy him action figures for his birthdays. All these places that held memories of time I'd spent with my nephew, and it made me realize just how much of his childhood I'd been present for up until the move. School got out at 2:30, and I met Marcus and Sarah in the pickup line. We could see all the kids filing out of the building with their teachers, each class in a neat little line. When Maddie's class came out, I spotted him immediately. He was bouncing on his toes, scanning the crowd of cars and parents, obviously looking for us. When he saw Marcus's car and me standing next to it, his face broke into this huge grin. He said something to Mrs. Henderson, who nodded and smiled, and then he was running toward us, his new backpack bouncing against his back. "Uncle Jake, you waited for me?" he shouted, launching himself at me again. This kid was definitely a hugger. "Of course I waited," I said, catching him and lifting him up in a big bear hug. "I told you we were getting ice cream, didn't I? I never break a promise." "Never ever?" he asked, pulling back to look at my face seriously. "Never ever," I confirmed. He seemed satisfied with that answer and wiggled to be put down. Then he immediately started talking a mile a minute about his day. He told us about all the different learning centers in the classroom, about a kid named Tyler who he thought might become his friend, about how Mrs. Henderson let them go to the library and he picked out 2 books to bring home. He talked about the lunch he ate, about recess on the playground, about music class where they learned a song about the days of the week. The whole time we were walking to the car and buckling him in, he just kept talking. Sarah and Marcus were asking him questions, encouraging him to tell us more, and I could see how relieved and happy they were that his first day had gone so well. We drove to this ice cream place that had been there forever. It was called Scoops and Smiles, and they made their ice cream fresh every day. Maddie had been going there since he was old enough to eat ice cream. And it was kind of a family tradition for special occasions. Inside, the place smelled like waffle cones and vanilla. There were probably 15 different flavors in the display case, and Maddie pressed his face right up against the glass, trying to decide what he wanted. He ended up choosing Superman ice cream. You know, that crazy bright blue, red, and yellow stuff that kids go nuts for. In a waffle cone. Marcus got chocolate chip, Sarah got strawberry, and I got mint chocolate chip. We sat at one of those little round tables by the window, and Maddie continued his detailed report of his first day of first grade. He told us about every single kid in his class, describing each one and what they'd done that day. He explained the classroom rules that Mrs. Henderson had gone over. He showed us the homework sheet she'd sent home, which was just some simple drawing activity to do with parents. And the best part, he said, his mouth ringed with blue ice cream, was that Uncle Jake was there. Some of the other kids thought that was so cool. Tyler asked if you could come back and be like a helper or something. But I told him you have an important job far away. "That's right," I said. "But even though I can't be here every day, I'm always thinking about you, and we can still FaceTime all the time like we do." "I know," he said, "but it's better when you're really here. Can you come back for my birthday?" His birthday was in about 2 months, and honestly, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I looked at Marcus and Sarah, who both gave me these hopeful looks. "You know what?" I said. "I'm going to try my absolute hardest to make that happen. I can't promise for sure because of work, but I'll do everything I can to be here." "Okay." Maddie seemed happy with that answer and went back to attacking his ice cream cone. We stayed at Scoops and Smiles for probably an hour, just sitting and talking and watching Maddie be his goofy, energetic self. Other families came and went, kids running around with their cones dripping everywhere, parents trying to wipe up messes. It was chaotic and loud and sticky, and honestly, it was perfect. Eventually, we headed back to Marcus and Sarah's house. Maddie wanted to show me his room, which he'd redecorated since I'd last been there. He'd gotten new bedding with a space theme, planets and rockets and astronauts all over it. He'd also gotten this whole new bookshelf that Marcus had built and painted blue, and it was full of his books and some of the action figures I'd sent him. "This is where I keep all the stuff you send me," he said, pointing to a specific shelf. "That way it's all together and I can look at it whenever I want and remember you." I sat down on his floor and looked at the shelf. There were the action figures, but also some postcards I'd sent him from my new city, a stuffed animal I'd mailed him for no particular reason, and a framed photo of the two of us from last Christmas. Seeing it all displayed like that, like a little Uncle Jake shrine, it got me emotional all over again. "That's really cool, buddy," I managed to say. "I love that you keep everything." "Of course I keep everything," he said matter-of-factly. "You're my favorite uncle." "I'm your only uncle," I reminded him with a grin. "But you'd still be my favorite even if I had 100 uncles," he insisted, plopping down on the floor next to me. We sat there for a while, and I asked him to tell me more about his day. Now that some time had passed, he was remembering little details he'd forgotten to mention before. He told me about a girl named Emma, who had cried when her mom left, and how Mrs. Henderson had let her hold this stuffed rabbit until she felt better. He talked about the water fountain in the hallway and how you had to push the button really hard to get the water to come out. He described the cafeteria and what it smelled like and how loud it was with all the kids talking. Every single detail seemed important to him, like he was trying to record the entire experience in his memory. And I listened to all of it, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, acting surprised at the dramatic parts. This was what I'd driven 4 hours for. Not just the surprise at the beginning of the day, but this quiet moment in his room, just the two of us, with him sharing his world with me. Sarah called us down for dinner around 6. She'd made spaghetti with meatballs, which was Maddie's favorite meal. We all sat around their dining table, and the conversation flowed easily. Maddie was still energetic, still talking about school, but you could tell he was starting to wind down a little. The excitement and emotion of the day were catching up with him. After dinner, Marcus suggested we watch a movie together. We let Maddie pick, and he chose some animated thing about a kid who discovers his toys are secretly alive. I'd seen it before, but I didn't mind watching it again. We all piled onto their couch, Marcus and Sarah on one end, me on the other, and Maddie sprawled across all of us with his head on my lap. About halfway through the movie, I looked down and realized he'd fallen asleep. His mouth was slightly open, his breathing deep and even. One of his hands was clutching the hem of my shirt. Sarah noticed too and smiled at me, mouthing, "He's out." When the movie ended, Marcus carefully picked Maddie up and carried him to his room. I followed, watching as Marcus gently put him into his bed and pulled the space-themed covers up over him. Maddie stirred just a little, his eyes fluttering open for a second. "Uncle Jake?" he mumbled sleepily. "Right here, buddy," I said, stepping closer to his bed. "You'll still be here tomorrow morning?" "I will. I'm not leaving until tomorrow afternoon, so we'll have breakfast together, okay?" "Okay. Love you." "Love you too, Maddie. Sweet dreams." He was already asleep again before I finished the sentence. Marcus and I tiptoed out of the room, pulling the door mostly closed behind us. Downstairs, the three of us adults stayed up talking for another couple hours. We broke out a bottle of wine, sat in their living room, and just enjoyed each other's company. Sarah thanked me again for coming down and making the day so special. Marcus told me I could visit whenever I wanted, that their door was always open. It felt good being back with family like this. I ended up crashing on their couch that night instead of going back to my hotel. It just seemed easier. And plus, this way, I'd be there when Maddie woke up, like I'd promised. True to form, Maddie came padding into the living room around 6:30 the next morning. I was still half asleep when I felt him climb onto the couch next to me. "You're still here," he whispered, like he was afraid I might disappear if he said it too loud. "Told you I would be," I whispered back, ruffling his hair. "What do you say we go wake up your parents and make them cook us breakfast?" His face lit up, and we crept upstairs together, planning our strategy for waking up Marcus and Sarah in the most annoying way possible. We decided on jumping on their bed and singing loudly, which definitely did the trick. Sarah groaned and tried to pull a pillow over her head, while Marcus just laughed and pretended to be a monster who was gonna catch us. Breakfast was chaotic and fun. Sarah made pancakes while Marcus and I tried to teach Maddie how to juggle with oranges from their fruit bowl. He couldn't quite get the hang of it, but he thought it was hilarious every time one of us dropped an orange and it went rolling across the kitchen floor. We ate our pancakes. Maddie insisted on having chocolate chips in his, naturally, and talked about random stuff. Maddie was already asking when he could bring Tyler home for a playdate, even though he'd literally just met the kid yesterday. That's 6-year-old logic for you, though. One day of school and he's already planning his entire social life. Around mid-morning, I knew I had to start thinking about heading out. I had that 4-hour drive ahead of me, and I wanted to get back before it got too late. The thought of leaving was already making me feel heavy, and I could tell Maddie was starting to realize it too, because he got quieter, more clingy. "Do you really have to go?" he asked, for probably the 10th time that morning. We were in the living room, and he was sitting pressed right up against my side on the couch. "I really do, buddy. I've got work tomorrow, and I need to get home and get ready for the week." "But you just got here," he said, his voice getting that wobbly quality that meant he was trying not to cry. I put my arm around him and pulled him closer. "I know it feels that way, but we had yesterday afternoon together, and all of last night, and this whole morning. That's actually a pretty good amount of time." "It's not enough, though," he said quietly. And man, that just about killed me. You're right. It's never enough. But you know what? We've got FaceTime, and I promise I'll call you at least twice a week. And I'm going to try really, really hard to come back for your birthday. Plus, maybe during one of your school breaks, you and your parents could drive up to visit me. You could see where I live now, meet some of my friends, check out my new place. How does that sound? He thought about it for a second, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "Would we stay at your house?" "Absolutely. I've got a guest room that would be all yours. And there's this really cool children's museum in my city that I think you'd love. They've got this whole section about dinosaurs with life-size models and everything." His eyes perked up a little at that. Maddie was super into dinosaurs. Had been since he was like 3 years old. Life-size? Like actual big dinosaurs? Huge ones. There's a T-Rex that's like 30 feet tall. Whoa! He was definitely interested now, which was what I was hoping for. Give him something to look forward to, something to focus on, instead of just being sad about me leaving. We talked more about what we could do if they came to visit. The museum, the zoo, this arcade I'd found that had all these vintage games, a pizza place that made absolutely massive slices. By the time I actually had to pack up my stuff and head out, Maddie was still sad but not devastated. Progress. The goodbye was still hard, though. Of course it was. We stood in the driveway next to my car, and Maddie wrapped his arms around my waist, so tight I thought he might actually fuse himself to me permanently. "I'm gonna miss you so much," he said, his voice muffled against my stomach. "I'm gonna miss you too. But remember, we're gonna talk on FaceTime, right? And you can tell me all about school and your new friends and everything you're learning. And you'll tell me about your work and your city? Every single detail," I promised. Sarah gave me a long hug and made me promise to text when I got home, so she knew I'd made it safely. Marcus shook my hand and pulled me in for one of those guy hugs where you pat each other on the back. "Thank you again," he said. Seriously, this was really special. Any time, I told him, and I meant it. Getting into my car was one of the hardest things I've had to do in a while. I could see Maddie through the windshield, standing between his parents, looking small and sad. I waved at him, and he waved back with this little, half-hearted wave that just about broke my heart all over again. I pulled out of the driveway slowly, watching them in my rearview mirror. Maddie was waving more enthusiastically now, jumping up and down. I honked my horn twice, our special thing. 2 honks meant love you, and he put his hand over his heart, which was his way of saying love you too. The drive home was long and gave me a lot of time to think. I thought about how much Maddie had grown, how confident he'd seemed at school once he got over the initial surprise of seeing me. I thought about how good it had felt to be back with my family, even just for a day and a half. I thought about how much I was sacrificing by living so far away, but also how important my job and my career were to me. It was complicated, you know. Life is complicated. There's no perfect answer where everyone gets everything they want. You make choices and you live with them, and you try to make the best of whatever situation you're in. I called Sarah when I got home like I'd promised. She put me on speaker so Maddie could say goodnight. He told me all about the rest of his day. They'd gone to the park after I left, and he'd made it across the monkey bars all by himself for the first time ever. He was so proud, and I was proud of him too. We talked for maybe 15 minutes before Sarah said it was time for him to take a bath and get ready for bed. "FaceTime tomorrow?" Maddie asked before we hung up. "FaceTime tomorrow?" I confirmed. "Same time as always, right after dinner." "Okay, bye, Uncle Jake. Thank you for surprising me." "Anytime, buddy. You have a good night, okay?" "Okay, love you." "Love you too." After we hung up, I just sat on my couch in my apartment, in this city where I'd built a new life, and I felt this weird mix of emotions again. Happy that the surprise had gone so well, sad that I lived so far away. Grateful for technology that let us stay connected, lonely because it wasn't the same as being there in person. But you know what? I didn't regret it. Not for a second. Seeing Maddie's face light up when he realized I was there, feeling him crash into me with that hug, spending that time with my family, it was worth every mile of driving, every dollar spent on gas and the hotel, every bit of exhaustion I felt. That's the thing about family, right? You show up for them. You make the effort. You prioritize them even when it's inconvenient or difficult or expensive. Because those moments, those memories, they're what matter. They're what you'll remember years from now. And I think Maddie will remember his first day of first grade for the rest of his life. Not just because it was his first day, but because his uncle loved him enough to drive 4 hours just to be there for him. That's the message I wanted to send him. That's what I wanted him to know deep down in his heart. He's loved. He's valued. He's important enough for people to go out of their way for him. I kept my promise about FaceTime. We talked the next day, and the day after that. And pretty much every other day that week, he'd tell me about school, about Tyler, who was definitely becoming his friend, about Emma, who had stopped crying and was now one of the loud kids at recess, about all the things Mrs. Henderson was teaching them. Sometimes he'd show me his homework or a drawing he'd made. Other times we'd just make silly faces at each other through the screen. About a week after the surprise, Sarah sent me a video. It was from Maddie's classroom. Apparently, Mrs. Henderson had been recording them talking about their families. When it was Maddie's turn, he stood up in front of the whole class and held up that drawing he'd made on the first day, the one with all the stick figures, including me in the corner. "This is my family," he said to the camera, pointing at each figure. "That's my dad Marcus, and my mom Sarah, and that's me, and that's our dog Pepper. And this is my Uncle Jake." The weeks went by, and Maddie settled into first grade. He made more friends, started bringing home actual homework assignments, learned to read new words. Every time we FaceTimed, he seemed a little more grown up, a little more confident. And every time he'd ask when I was coming back to visit. I'd been serious about trying to make it back for his birthday. I talked to my boss, checked my schedule, moved some things around. It took some finagling, but I managed to arrange it so I could take a long weekend and drive down for his birthday party. This time, though, it wasn't going to be a surprise. Marcus and Sarah thought it would be better if Maddie knew I was coming so he could look forward to it, and I agreed. When I told him on FaceTime that I'd definitely be there for his birthday, he literally screamed with excitement, like full volume, jumping up and down on the couch screaming. Sarah had to take the phone away from him for a second because the screaming was so loud it was distorting the microphone. "Are you really, really, really coming?" he asked when he finally calmed down enough to talk again. "You promise?" "I promise. I've already got the time off work approved and everything. I'll drive down Friday afternoon, stay through the weekend, and head back Monday morning. We're going to have the whole weekend together. This is the best birthday ever, and it's not even here yet," he announced. His birthday fell on a Saturday, and the party was going to be at this local trampoline park that had just opened up. Maddie had been begging to go there since he'd seen a commercial for it, so Marcus and Sarah had decided to do his party there. He was allowed to invite 10 friends, and he'd already made a list of exactly which kids from school he wanted to bring. The weeks leading up to his birthday, we talked about it constantly. He told me about the invitations he'd made at school with Mrs. Henderson's help. He described in detail what kind of cake he wanted. Chocolate with chocolate frosting and blue decorations, because blue was his favorite color now. He explained the rules of all the games they were gonna play at the trampoline park. The kid had clearly been thinking about nothing else. I drove down that Friday afternoon, and this time I went straight to their house instead of sneaking around. Maddie was watching out the front window waiting for me, and the second my car pulled up, he came bursting out the front door. Didn't even put on shoes, just ran out in his socks. "You're here! You're here! You're actually here!" He was doing this weird hopping thing because the driveway was cold and his feet were only covered by thin socks, but he didn't seem to care. "Get inside, you maniac! You're gonna freeze your feet off!" I laughed, scooping him up and carrying him back toward the house. "I don't care! You're here for my birthday!" That whole weekend was honestly amazing. Friday night, we just hung out at their house, ordered pizza, played some board games. Maddie sat next to me the entire time, constantly touching my arm or leaning against me, like he needed the physical confirmation that I was really there. Saturday morning, we all got up early to decorate for the party. Well, Sarah and I decorated, while Marcus ran to pick up the cake, and Maddie ran around getting in the way, but being super enthusiastic about it. We blew up what felt like 800 blue and silver balloons. We hung streamers, we set up a whole present table. The house looked like a birthday bomb had exploded in it, but Maddie loved it. The party at the trampoline park was chaos in the best possible way. 10 6-year-olds bouncing off the walls. Literally bouncing off the walls, because that's what you do at a trampoline park. Hyped up on excitement and sugar. Maddie introduced me to all his friends, walking around like a little tour guide. This is Tyler. This is Emma. This is Lucas. This is Sophia, and so on. I jumped on the trampolines with them, played dodgeball in the foam pit, went down this crazy slide thing that dumped you into a pool of foam cubes. I was definitely going to be sore the next day, but it was worth it to see how happy Maddie was. At one point, he came bouncing over to me with the biggest smile on his face and said, "This is the best birthday party anyone has ever had in the history of birthdays." "Oh yeah? Better than when Tyler had his party at the bowling alley?" I teased. He told me all about Tyler's party a few weeks ago. "Way better, because you're here," he said, then bounced away to go play with his friends again. We sang happy birthday, ate cake that was probably 60% frosting, and Maddie opened his presents. I'd gotten him this big dinosaur encyclopedia he'd been wanting, plus a Model T-Rex that we could build together. When he opened it, he lost his mind with excitement, showing it to every single person at the party, whether they cared or not. After the party, back at the house, everyone was exhausted. The kids had all gone home on massive sugar highs that their parents were gonna have to deal with. Marcus and Sarah were sprawled on the couch, looking like they'd run a marathon. Maddie was still wired, though, running around with his new toys and talking about every single moment of the party. "Did you see when I did that flip? Did you see when Emma fell in the foam pit? Did you see how much cake Lucas ate? Did you see—" "Buddy," Sarah interrupted gently, "maybe take a breath for a second." He took a dramatic deep breath, held it for a second, then let it out and immediately continued. "Did you see when me and Tyler were jumping at the same time and we almost crashed into each other?" I caught Marcus's eye and we both started cracking up. This kid had enough energy to power a small city. That night, after Maddie finally crashed from his sugar high and went to bed, the three of us adults sat in the living room with some beer Marcus had bought. We were all exhausted, but in that good way, where you're tired because you did something fun, not because you're stressed or overworked. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, not for the first time that weekend. It really meant the world to him. "Did you see his face today?" "I mean, that's kinda impossible to miss," I joked. Kid couldn't stop smiling if his life depended on it. "He's been so excited about this for weeks," Marcus added. "Ever since you confirmed you were coming. It's all he's talked about at school, apparently. Mrs. Henderson mentioned it at pickup one day. Said Maddie had told the whole class at least 5 times that his uncle was coming for his birthday. That made me feel good, but also a little guilty. I wish I could be here more often. I hate that these visits are such rare things that he gets this excited about them." "Hey," Sarah said, her voice firm but kind. "Don't do that. Don't feel guilty about living your life. You're doing an amazing job of staying connected despite the distance. You FaceTime regularly, you send him stuff, you come visit when you can. That's more than a lot of people do, even when they live in the same city." She's right. Marcus agreed. You're a great uncle, Jake. Don't beat yourself up because you can't be here 24/7. That's not realistic for anyone. We talked late into the night about life and jobs and family and all the complicated ways those things intersect. It felt good having those deeper conversations with my brother and sister-in-law. Sometimes, when you live far away, you only get to have surface-level conversations because there's never enough time to dig into the real stuff. But this weekend, we had time. Sunday was more low-key. We went out for brunch at this diner Maddie loved, then spent the afternoon at their house. Maddie and I built his T-Rex model together at the kitchen table. It took us like 3 hours because the instructions were way more complicated than I'd expected. But we figured it out. He was so proud when we finally finished it, immediately running to show his parents and declaring that it was going on his Uncle Jake's shelf in his room. That evening, we watched a movie together, Maddie's choice again, some superhero thing this time. And just like last time, he fell asleep with his head on my lap about halfway through. I looked down at him sleeping there, his face peaceful and relaxed, still wearing his birthday crown from the party that he'd refused to take off all day. And I felt this overwhelming wave of love for this kid. He was such a good kid, you know? Smart and funny and kind and enthusiastic about everything. The kind of kid who made friends easily because he was genuinely interested in other people. The kind of kid who got excited about learning new things. The kind of kid who loved hard and wasn't afraid to show it. And I was so lucky to be his uncle, to be someone important in his life, to be someone he looked up to and missed when I wasn't around. That was a privilege. And I didn't take it lightly. Monday morning came way too fast. I had to leave early to make it back in time for work the next day, which meant saying goodbye to Maddie before school. He took it better this time than he had after the first day of school surprise. Maybe because he'd known this time that I was only here for the weekend. Maybe because he was getting more used to the pattern of me visiting and then leaving. Or maybe he was just emotionally exhausted from all the birthday excitement. "When are you coming back?" he asked as I was loading my bag into my car. "I don't know exactly yet, buddy, but definitely before Christmas. And remember, you guys might come visit me too. Your dad said they'd try to make that happen during your fall break." "Yeah, the dinosaur museum!" His face lit up at the reminder. "Exactly. So really, it won't be that long before we see each other again." He nodded, then wrapped his arms around me. "Thank you for coming to my birthday. It was the best one ever." "You already said that like 10 times, I teased, hugging him back. "Well, it's still true." I said goodbye to Marcus and Sarah, promised again to text when I got home, and got in my car. The goodbye was getting easier, but it still sucked. Driving away, I could see Maddie in the rearview mirror, waving with both hands above his head. I honked twice, and even though I couldn't see his face clearly anymore from that distance, I knew he was putting his hand over his heart. The drive back gave me time to think about everything, like it always did. I thought about how the first day of school surprise had led to this, to me being there for his birthday, to us building that T-Rex together, to all these memories we were creating, despite the distance. I thought about how we were making it work, this whole long-distance uncle-nephew relationship. Was it perfect? No. Would I rather live closer and be able to see him more often? Absolutely. But was it still meaningful and special and worth all the effort? Without a doubt. I kept my promise about FaceTime, like always. That first call after I got back, Maddie showed me where he'd put the T-Rex in his room, right on his desk where he could see it while he did homework. He told me all about how he'd worn his birthday crown to school that day, and Mrs. Henderson had led the class in singing Happy Birthday to him again. He said he'd shared the leftover birthday cake with Tyler at lunch. And life went on like that. FaceTime calls every few days. Updates about school, about his friends, about the books he was reading, and the things he was learning. He started playing soccer on a local kids team, and Sarah would send me videos of his games. I'd send him postcards from different places in my city, and he'd add them to his Uncle Jake's shelf. Marcus and Sarah did make it happen. They brought Maddie to visit me during his fall break. He stayed in my guest room, which I decorated with some dinosaur posters and stocked with books I thought he'd like. We went to the Children's Museum, and he absolutely flipped out over those life-size dinosaur models like I knew he would. We went to the zoo, the arcade, got those massive pizza slices I'd told him about. He met some of my friends, saw where I worked, got to experience my new life firsthand. Having him in my space, the night before they had to drive back home, Maddie and I were sitting on my couch after everyone else had gone to bed. He was in his pajamas, supposed to be sleeping, but he'd snuck back out to the living room. "Uncle Jake?" he said quietly. "Yeah, buddy? I'm glad you moved here." That surprised me. "Really? I thought you were upset that I lived far away." "I was at first," he admitted. "I was really sad, but now I think it's kind of cool. Because I get to come visit you here and see all this stuff. And when you come visit us, it's like extra special because it doesn't happen all the time. And we do FaceTime so much that it's not like you're really gone. You're just somewhere else." Out of the mouths of babes, right? This 6-year-old had basically figured out what I'd been struggling with for months. That distance doesn't have to mean disconnection. That you can maintain relationships across miles if you put in the effort. That sometimes the time you spend together is more meaningful because it's more intentional. "That's a really smart way to think about it," I told him, putting my arm around his shoulders. "You're a pretty wise kid. You know that?" "I know," he said matter-of-factly, which made me laugh. "All right, wise guy, get back to bed before your parents catch you out here and I get in trouble." He hugged me goodnight and headed back to the guest room, and I sat there on my couch feeling grateful. Grateful for technology that let us stay connected. Grateful for understanding family who supported my career choices. Grateful for a nephew who loved me enough to adapt to the situation instead of just being resentful about it. Looking back now, that surprise on his first day of school was just the beginning. It set the tone for how we'd navigate this new chapter of our relationship. It showed Maddie that even though I lived far away, I was still there for the important moments. It showed me that the effort was always worth it, that every mile driven and every dollar spent was an investment in something that mattered. And you know what? That kid was right. The distance did make our time together more special. When I visited now, we didn't take a single moment for granted. We were present with each other, fully engaged, making the most of every hour. And honestly, that's probably healthier than if I lived next door and we saw each other so often that we stopped appreciating it. I'm not gonna lie and say the distance is easy. It's not. There are still times when I wish I could just drive over for dinner on a random Tuesday. Times when Maddie has a bad day and I wish I could be there in person to cheer him up instead of just through a screen. Times when I miss family gatherings or school events because I can't always make the drive. But we make it work. We figured out our rhythm. And every time I do make it back for a visit, every time I see his face light up when I walk through the door, every time he wraps his arms around me and tells me he missed me, it reminds me why all of this matters so much. That first day of school surprise? That was almost 6 months ago now. In that time, I've been back to visit 3 more times. Marcus, Sarah, and Maddie have come to visit me twice. We FaceTime at least twice a week, sometimes more. Maddie's thriving in first grade. He can read chapter books now. He's made a solid group of friends. And he's even lost his first tooth, which he made sure to show me immediately on FaceTime. And every single time we talk, at the end of the call, he says, "Love you, Uncle Jake," and I say, "Love you too, buddy." And it doesn't matter that we're 4 hours apart. The love is there. The connection is there. The relationship is there. That's what I learned from all of this. That showing up, whether it's physically or through FaceTime or through texts and phone calls and postcards, that's what matters. Being present in whatever way you can, making the effort, prioritizing the people who matter to you. So yeah, I surprised my nephew on his first day of school, and his reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. But the real surprise was what came after. The real surprise was discovering that distance didn't have to diminish our relationship. It just changed the shape of it. And in some ways, it made it even stronger. Because now when I tell Maddie I love him, when I drive 4 hours just to spend a weekend with him, when I clear my schedule and move things around to make sure I'm there for his important moments, he knows exactly how much he means to me. There's no doubt. There's no question. The effort speaks louder than words ever could. And that's the story. That's the whole thing. From planning the surprise to pulling it off to building this new kind of relationship that works for us despite the miles between us. It's been an adventure, and it's still ongoing. Because family isn't about proximity. It's about priority. And Maddie will always be one of my top priorities, no matter where either of us lives. That kid's gonna grow up knowing he had an uncle who drove 4 hours to surprise him on his first day of school, who rearranged his work schedule to be there for birthdays, who FaceTimed him twice a week without fail, who made him feel loved and important and valued, even from a distance. And honestly, that's what being a good uncle is all about. That's what family is all about. Showing up, making the effort, and making sure the people you love know they're loved. So yeah, if you've got family or friends living far away, if you've got someone you care about but don't get to see as often as you'd like, this is your sign to surprise them. To make the drive, book the flight, send the care package, make the FaceTime call, whatever it takes. Because those moments of connection, those memories you create together, that's the stuff that really matters in life. Can trust me, their reaction, it'll be totally worth it.